Okay guys, so today we're going to be going over the geography IA, and honestly this is an IA that I feel pretty comfortable with, pretty happy with the result I got. So if we look at my results, where were we here in geography? In the IA, I ended up getting 21 out of 25, which was a good 7, and that definitely carried my 7 in geography, so super happy with it. And I spent a lot of effort going over my Geo IA, talking to my teacher, so I have a good few tips and a lot of feedback to give on this particular IA. And let's get straight into it. So first of all, put that away. The word limit, everyone knows, it's 2,500 words, and it's unlike most other IAs because, for example, for physics IA, it has to be less than 12 pages. The maths IA is between 12 and 20 pages. This is one of the few times that you're restricted by the number of words rather than by the length of the IA. So what that tells me is that, okay, if I have less words, how else do I communicate information? Photos, and this is a critical part of my IA and what I did in my IA. So let's see, for example, in my geography one, I ended up having 41 different figures in my IA, and that just shows you how many photos I included. Like, for example, let's go to a random page here. Half of the things are photos. So you want to make sure, first of all, that if you don't have enough words, try to communicate what you can, or at least communicate the most that you can through photos. And also, some very good tips before you get into maths IA real quick is the word limit. There are a few things I want to point out because I realize a lot of people, or most people, don't actually know about these. Of course, title page is not included. Acknowledgements, this is all obvious. Titles, some people get confused about because titles, you think, okay, conclusion, what are you going to say? But instead, if you say, for example, I did it for my hypothesis, when you talk about each hypothesis separately, instead of just saying hypothesis 1, I said hypothesis 1, blah, 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 blah. So of course, you can state your hypothesis in the title. So it might be a 15-word title or subtitle, but since it's still considered a title, that hypothesis isn't, or that's not considered part of the word count. So instead of having to specify your hypothesis in the actual paragraph, you can say in the title, if that makes sense. So you can cut down on, if you're just a couple hundred words off, you can definitely chop down on a lot of words there. Another thing, super important, footnotes. It even specifies up to a maximum of 15 words each. Now, if you look at my IA, I basically put footnotes on every single page so that I could, or definitions or things that are just important or acronyms that I use throughout, you can just make them a footnote, or every time that anything that's relevant that can be condensed into 15 words, I'll show you in Maths IA as well, make that a footnote, super easy. Another super important one, labels of 10 words or less. What this means, and you actually need to put labels on your diagrams and photos to get the top grade boundary. We'll talk about this later as well. But what this means is that you can put text boxes on photos, and that doesn't count in the word count. So for example, if you have a map, and you can, instead of discussing about the map of the outliers or whether it follows the trend in the paragraph, you can talk about it in the text boxes, which are labels. Of course, they can only be 10 words or less, which isn't that many. However, you can, if you put a lot of labels, don't go overboard. But let's go through some of mine. Basically, every single one of my photos, you can see here that there are labels on every single one, so I don't have to put it in the paragraph. It's quite funny. You actually look at my word count, it's 5,200 words basically. It's even longer than my E, which is a bit concerning considering that you're only allowed to write 2,500 words. But I went around this, of course, by talking about all the different methods, and my word count is actually quite far below, 2,432. Still got a good few words to spare. So make sure for the word limit, include footnotes and labels, and think about your titles and subtitles. And of course, tables should be pretty obvious, but that's not included. And yeah, of course, it says again, any annotations over 10 words and footnotes. So they mention it twice. So they're trying to say that this isn't dodgy. This is something you're generally allowed to do if you could or if you had to. And next, we're going to be talking about the emphasis that your work should be analytical. So it's all about how you treat and analyze your data. So it's actually quite interesting how it's most of the IA, it's actually oriented around data analysis to some extent and how you treat your results rather than the theory itself. Of course, you want to show and demonstrate that you know the geographical theory back to front, like the back of your hand, but you definitely need to treat and analyze your data very carefully. And of course, format. A really important point is that it says here clearly, figures such as maps, diagrams, and tables are numbered and referenced in the text. So every single photo, diagram, data, map that you have, you need to reference it. For example, if you're saying when we went to the Threadbare River, seen in map 2, then we found this and this and this, and the results can be seen in table 14. Like, just small things. You need to reference every single diagram and table within your text, and this also adds a layer of coherence to your IA. Now we're actually going to be going over each criteria, and the suggested word limit, it's a good idea. It's a rough guide, but of course it's only a suggestion and it depends for every topic, every IA. So let's go about criterion A real quick. Fieldwork question and geographical context. Let's read it out real quick. Students must also comment briefly on the geographic context, explaining, and this is very important, why and where the fieldwork investigation is to be carried out. So I'm going to go for Matt's IA and show you where and where he has not done this, but you want to make sure that you not only say it was carried out in this area, here's a map of the region, ta-da, that's it. You also need to show and explain the reason behind it. What is the significance? What are the impacts? Why are your findings important? Like, why would you even bother to do this? Why would you bother to do this in the first place? What is the importance of it? So if we go over, where are we? If we go over Matt's IA, let's start from the beginning and we'll go through this with him. So of course, starts off well, title page, can't fault that, nothing crazy. Acknowledgement, not necessary. I've never even thought to put acknowledgements in there, but could be nice. Contents, perfect. All right, so criterion A, fieldwork, question, geographic context, exactly. I like what he's done here, and I did the same. Also, first of all, it's criterion A. A single criteria is a criterion, so don't get that wrong. And yeah, exactly. Introduction, location. I like the 3 different maps. Very clear about, very nicely done. What I would do as well, it's also very nice how it's been hand drawn, the one on the left. It shows that you've actually put effort into the map as well and not just copied off Google Earth. And please make sure on every single map you put a scale and which way is north. And also, you should put a title, or you actually need to put a title on every single map. Here it's a bit different because there's 3 maps, but even then you could just put a little text box above it saying location of where the field study was carried out. Just small things like this. And also, I would like some more clarity as to where exactly in this region you're surveying. It's part of your IA. Later on, it's obvious that it's going to be this small strip here. But as of right now, I have no idea the significance of this map. What is this map? Why is it important to me? So I would definitely just highlight exactly where your IA is being carried out to make it obvious and clear as to the location of your IA. So once again, if we go back to the criteria, why and where the field work is being carried out. So now it's obvious where it's being carried out, but why it's being carried out is still not too sure. He links very well to the syllabus. So he talks about exactly which option of the syllabus and which subtopic, which is very nicely done, and talks to some extent about why it needs to be done. This investigation will determine if models to delimit the central business district of cities are applicable to Newcastle. Now he says what he's doing, but he still doesn't say why it needs to be done. So if I were Matt, I would change slightly why, or explain why is this important. Why do we need to know if it's applicable to Newcastle? Why is this important? What's the point of this? So just small things, but make sure you tackle that. And once again, if we go to the highest level mark descriptor, it says clearly identifying a precise location. Now this takes me back to the point that as of right now, yes, it gives me a region, yes, it's within Newcastle, but exactly where in Newcastle? I want to know which region you are surveying, because right now I have a few fancy diagrams, I have a few nice maps. It doesn't tell me exactly where you're doing it, so that is critical. So let's keep going here. Okay, so fieldwork question, very nicely done, nice question. Not exactly sure why you're repeating the question below it, but we'll talk to you later about that. And again, we can make a few things footnotes. For example, here in the core frame model, in the CFM, the CBD is the commercial center of a city comprised of an inner and outer core. This is the perfect thing you can put in a footnote. You can say in the CFM, the CBD, and then you can insert a little footnote, and then the footnote can be CBD is the commercial center of the city comprised of the inner and outer core. Stuff like that. So that is incredibly useful for when it's just 10-15 words that you don't need to put in the paragraph, but you could actually put in the footnote, and then suddenly it's not in your word count. There's small things that are incredibly important. So let's keep going. Below, stunning diagram. I really like how you put the theory right into the paragraph, right above the hypothesis. And this is incredibly important. You can't just pull a hypothesis out of nowhere, because yes, you've done the work. Yes, you've done some study in the textbook and you understand the theory to some extent. But you have to show that you truly understand what you're talking about. So it's incredibly important to put the theory before you put the hypothesis. And once again, I would like some more clarification as to where you got these hypotheses from, because yes, the CBD houses from the CFM we can hypothesize that the CBD houses clustered services. Why? Just in this hypothesis, I would like to say because of XXX. Like just small things, just a small thing that shows that you understand the theory deeply to some, and you're just not pulling this out of the textbook and you haven't just read the textbook and copying it. Again, yeah, it shows that you understand the geographical knowledge. So please put some justification next to the hypothesis. All right, so next we're going to be going on to criterion B, methods of investigation, which is basically how are you getting the data? There's nothing more to it. How are you getting it? And there's really nothing else. But you have to say, describe, explain clearly and accurately how the combination of the data collected is relevant to the theory, and describe statistical tests if appropriate. So first of all, I want to talk about how that the data collected is relevant to the theory. So whenever you collect data, you have to say this table below shows this. This table, these results are relevant because, and then you explain why they're relevant. Because you can't just be talking about data without relating or without linking it back to not only the question, but also your hypotheses. Because after all, at least what I did in my IA, and what I think you should do in your IA as well, is you have your overall question, but within that you have 3 hypotheses that individually support. You can have 2 or 3, it doesn't have to be 3, but at least more than 1 for sure. 2 or 3 hypotheses that support that overall question, so that if these 3 hypotheses are met, or if most of them are met, then you can answer your fieldwork question, which is incredibly important. So make sure that the data you collect is always relevant to the theory, and you always link it back to that. And also, I would strongly suggest having an IA that includes statistical tests, because I've noticed in the Geo Guide, they include it so many times, they must find it incredibly important. I'm not sure why they admire so much these statistical tests, but what I did, I included a Pearson's correlation coefficient, and I also included the chi-squared test, which is the R-squared, and I'll show that in my IA as well later on. But I would strongly recommend, if you can. Unfortunately, Matt's one, the results or the findings he got, you can't really use a statistical test. But if you could, I would definitely recommend it. So now let's go on to his IA real quick. So very nicely done, a systematic sampling method straight away. These are some buzzwords they like to hear. But again, I would make this a footnote without a doubt. Explain what a systematic sampling method is. Small thing. Doesn't count you any word counts, it just shows you an understanding, a deeper understanding. It's not that hard, it's just 10 extra words. And nice, okay. At each point, recordings were taken on survey sheets. I want to see photos, I'd like to see photos of the procedure of the method you made. Because of course later on, yes, you only have actually 3 photos of you collecting data. And I'd like to see a bit more of it so you can actually see that, well, 1, you put the effort in and it actually did, and you didn't fake these results, they didn't just come out of nowhere. Unless they did, then watch out. And 2, it just shows that, yeah, you know what you're doing. So I'd definitely try to include some photos of collecting data as well. And then, since you have these photos, you can suddenly annotate these photos with the text boxes. So suddenly, not only do you have a photo, but you'll also have a medium of adding small text boxes that don't contribute to your word count. So all these small things. Next we have, again, rice pots. Make this a footnote. Instead of putting residential, industrial, commercial, entertainment, public buildings, make it a footnote. Super easy, saves you 10 words. Okay, then we're moving on to, yes, okay, so you actually need to explain, I like what he's doing. He's attempting to explain the reasoning behind the method he used within his different hypotheses to collect data, but it needs to be much deeper reasoning. You can't just say, the 2-minute interval allowed traffic lights to cycle, ensuring there was no random error due to traffic lights. You could say, otherwise, the results would be skewed because of this and this, or otherwise this could impact the results because of this. Or actually this is quite nicely done, but I don't see this I don't see this attempt of explaining the reasoning behind your method in the other sampling methods, which are land use, specialist shops, and so on. And also one more thing I'd like to mention is at least what I did, and I think this is a smart idea as well, is that whenever you make your own maps or your own diagrams, and this works for your E or for any one of your IAs, is that instead of putting your last name, so Maps 2021, McRae 2021, which is Matt's last name, remember that the IB marker has no clue what your name is. When they get your IA, they only have the candidate number and they don't have your name. So they wouldn't know that this map was actually created by the student. So what I would do instead of writing McRae, I would say produced by student 2021. So that way it's, or produced by author, sorry. Produced by author 2021. So that way it's clear that you're the person that actually made this map. You're the one that made it. Show some knowledge, some extent of geographical understanding. And so here, very nice diagrams. I like the inclusion of, you want to mix between hand-drawn diagrams, and of course photocopy it if you can, or scan it if you can, and also computer-drawn or computer-made diagrams. So I like the nice mix that you have there, because it's obvious that it's made by hand, and of course, once again, instead of McRae, I would say produced by author 2021. And one other thing is that it's actually interesting how in the GeoIA they don't mention anywhere the line spacing, which is quite interesting, because normally they make it obvious that it has to be double spaced, it has to be double spaced, it has to be double spaced, but here they don't. And what I would do, instead of making it single spaced, at least do 1.15, because for some reason the IA loves double space, the IB loves double spacing. Don't make a single space, 1.15 or even 1.5 if you can. After all, you've got no limit on the number of pages you have. I did double space personally, because that's what I did in every single other one of my IAs. But totally up to you, but I would definitely make it at least 1.15. Alright, so now we move on to the main part of the IA, criteria C and D. Not going to spend too much time on this, because of course this totally depends on your topic and what topic you're doing for your IA. So whenever you see, things like, due to Newcastle's small size and population on the data collected, shows only small variations, yet in such a setting, small changes are significant. So these small variations, I like how you already talked about the evaluation, and you already talked about the pros and cons on the outset. That I really like. But I would appreciate if you could say, these will be further discussed in the evaluation. Just a small thing to show that there's more to it. I'm not going to talk about it now because this goes in the evaluation, but I'm just putting it out there that these results might not be as significant as what I hoped. So I liked how you started off there. And actually, I'm going to go back to the GeoIA and at the IA guide and look at what they are looking for. So for criterion C, they're looking for statistical tests. Once again, they mention it everywhere. So please try to include them if you can. Graphs, diagrams, maps, annotated photographs. Again, annotated photographs. Notice how they have to be annotated now. So definitely put photographs in there with annotations, with text boxes. Students must also refer to the geographical context. Again, make sure everything's referred to each other. Yeah, it's a nexus, everything that you put in your IA. So refer back to the context as you need. So now we're going to be looking at the top mark band real quick. And it's talking about how the information and data collected is all directly relevant to the question formulated or the hypotheses. Now, I'm going to talk about this later on as well, but what I noticed in Maths 1 is that his results or his findings were only really relevant to his question, to his overall guiding question, rather than the actual individual hypotheses which he set out to do. Now, what I would do instead, or at least what I did, is that you want to answer each one of those hypotheses separately, and then once you've answered them, you say, okay, now that we've answered hypothesis 1, 2, and 3, I can say with this level of certainty that the results are, or that my findings are this, or that my findings are Y. So definitely try and answer your hypotheses and try and answer your guiding questions separately. So hypotheses first, and once you've done them, then answer your overall IA guiding question. And now what else is there? Yeah, so the graphs, tables, diagrams, or other illustrations follow conventions. And notice how these conventions are explicitly mentioned. Labeling and titles. So not only do you need to have a title, you also need to put labels on it. So I actually don't see any titles on any of these maps. So Matt, definitely So definitely fix that up real quick for me. But yeah, you definitely need to put titles, even if it's just small. You can say map of northern region of Newcastle. That's a title. That's super easy. It's just small things like this. Yeah, for example, let's look at something that could be put in a text box here. Let's read this out. This map shows a clustering of estate agents at the north of the A2 road, overlapping the clustering of high-end restaurants. Super easy diagram where you could put a line, put a text box saying overlapping of real estate agents, put another text box here, overlapping of clustering of high-end restaurants, and then put another text box next to it saying that there's an overlap and it reinforces the area's designation of the inner core. So suddenly you've just gotten rid of 30 words with 3 text boxes. Super easy, very easy way to reduce your word count. So I like here how he's doing some statistical calculations as much as he can, because of course his A is not as statistical as what mine was, at least what mine was. So now we move on to hypothesis 2, but this actually wasn't very clear to me. I didn't realize we'd moved on. I just thought it was a subtopic of the overarching question, So what I would do is make it very explicit here. Say hypothesis 2. Determining the CBD using specialty shops. Just small things, but makes it real easy for the marker to know where you're going. Because think about it, the marker's only really going to read through your IA once. It'd be nice if they spend 45 minutes on it, even an hour on it, but realistically, you're going to spend 10-15 minutes on it because they're trying to churn through as many IAs as possible because they have a deadline set and they're getting paid per IA, they're not getting paid per time. And so please make sure that everything is super clear, super obvious, don't make it convoluted. Titles, make them clear, make it obvious. It's not that challenging. So let's continue with his IA. Analysis 2. Once again, what does this mean? Analysis 2 of what? Or analysis of result for hypothesis 2. Just small things like that. I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to say actually, but just small things. Make it very clear, very obvious. Now, I am liking these maps. I like how they're annotated with the text boxes, but of course they can be annotated much more heavily. Please put a legend on it, and nicely done here with the legend. Again, you need a title. Yes, you have a caption. You also need a title, and the title and caption don't have to be the same. Because remember, the captions aren't included in the word count, but you definitely need to put a title as well. Yes, again, good photos, as I mentioned earlier. Would have loved to see them earlier when you're collecting the data, but that's okay. That's nice here as well. Nothing more to add yet. Produced by author. Again, really strong diagrams and maps. I really like the different diagrams you put in because this isn't something normal. This isn't a diagram you see every day. Something different, something that's going to make the marker stop and actually read and look at the diagram deeply. So well done here. And I definitely recommend put as many different types of maps as possible. Like in my IA, I had chloropleth, I had everything. I had all different types of maps. So make sure you don't just always have your results shown in one way. They actually they explicitly mention it somewhere in Criterion D written analysis that, oh, it wasn't there. Anyway, it was somewhere else that your result should be shown in different manners. Shouldn't just be shown in a graph every single time. We actually want it to be shown in a map, in a graph, through a photo, or just through a lot of different methods. And yeah, once again, the results are shown in many different ways. Nicely done with the maps. Again, really liking these maps. However, they do all need titles. And one other thing I would put is that at the bottom, or as a footnote really, in every single one of on every page really, this is what I did for my E, and also did it for every one of my IAs, is just put your fieldwork question, put your overall title, your overall question of your IA at the bottom, to remind the marker what you're actually trying to do, what you're actually trying to achieve. So that way, when they flick through every single page, they're reminded, oh, this is why this data is relevant. This is why the knowledge that they're giving me, this is why the data that they're finding is actually relevant to the question. So it's just a small thing. But what I'd put here, just put them at the bottom. I don't know, IA question. And then, yeah, center it. And then that way, whenever they scroll through every page, they get reminded of your IA question. Of course, please fix the amount of space. I'm sure you will. But you don't want just a map on a page. That's not pretty. It's not nice. All right, so let's talk about the conclusion. And before we go on, let's read what the IB has to say on the conclusion. Okay, so it's only 2 marks, but you want to get those 2 marks. These should be easy 2 marks to get. It's super simple. There should be a clear, concise statement answering the fieldwork question. Okay, so once again, that's why I think you should put the fieldwork question at the bottom of every single page so that the marker is reminded of what your fieldwork question is. However, it says, yeah, there's a clear conclusion, which is supported by analysis. So you need analysis in your conclusion. You can't just say, from the results above, my conclusion or my hypotheses were correct. You can't say that. You have to exactly mention what parts of the data were relevant. For example, if you made a correlation test, if you made a Pearson's correlation coefficient, you can say, from my results in hypothesis 1, it is evident that because the Pearson correlation coefficient was above a 1, then the data was strongly, there was a strong coefficient between them that was strongly related. So we can see that my hypothesis was valid. Just small things. You need to put data in there. You can't be descriptive. You need to include data. Meanwhile, here, yes, we have a few maps, but you're not really answering your overall arching question. Yes, to some extent you are. I feel this is measured as an appropriate delimiting of the CBD of Newcastle, but really, this doesn't seem very clear to me. It doesn't seem like it's supported by evidence. Yes, you have the 3 different maps, but I'd like to see some more analytics or some more analysis in here to support your conclusion, instead of just putting 2 different maps next to each other. Yes, that's what you're trying to do, but I would just make it seem like it's more supported by evidence, less descriptive, more explaining, more support by evidence. But overall, it's strongly done. And let's look at the evaluation. Now, this is the one thing I definitely think can really be improved. And the evaluation is critical, and it's worth another 3 marks. 3 marks is a lot, especially in this IA when it's only out of 25. So let's look at this. So in the evaluation, you want to be talking about the validity of the data, the specific and plausible ways in which the study might have been improved and could be extended. Now, keywords, specific and plausible. So let's go to Matt's A real quick, and let's look at the extensions. Carry out the same fieldwork during the summer and winter. Okay, that's specific and that's plausible. But you also have to explain the benefits clearly. You need to discuss the significance of the extensions. Are they actually important? Would they actually give you any more information that you needed that you didn't get earlier? What do you need? What does this actually tell you? So you want to make sure whenever you talk about the extensions, which you need to do in order to get the top band in the evaluation, discuss the significance of these extensions and discuss why they are required and why they're relevant and why they are important. And overall, it's a nice evaluation, but what I would do to change is that these are the strengths and weaknesses for each one of my hypotheses. So for example, if hypothesis 1, this is the one where I went outside and counted the number of cars that passed by along the road, the strengths of this hypothesis, or the strengths of the data collection for this hypothesis, were this, and the weaknesses were this. And these could be improved by this and this. Meanwhile, for hypothesis 2, the data collection method was X, and it could have been improved by this and that. So it's just small things. Instead of just... Overall, I think it can be structured better. I didn't use a table, but I know most people use a table. I just wrote in different paragraphs. From what I recall, let's just check real quick, where were we? Yeah, evaluation. I just put, overall evaluation. This could be extended by doing this and this. The strengths were here, and the weaknesses were that. Super simple, but definitely make it specific and definitely make it very, very clear as to the pros and cons of every testing method, as to pros and cons of your overarching method. So, for example, some things you could talk about are your choice of location. They specifically mention it, so please talk about that. The presentation of the data, were you biased? Does that change how the data could be interpreted? And once again, talking about the specific and plausible ways it could be improved, it clearly specifies the potential impact of these improvements are explained. So definitely, if you want to get the highest mark band, you need to include the potential impacts of these improvements, because you can see that's a key difference between the highest and the second highest mark band. Because here it says suggestions for improvements are outlined, but it doesn't say about the potential impacts of these improvements. So there's small things, but read through the syllabus very, very carefully. Read through the marking criteria very carefully and see what's the difference between the top mark band and the second top mark band. And other than that, I believe... appendix, nice. I don't have an appendix, not sure you really need to, but up to you. Bibliography, beautiful. I would make it a bit longer. I definitely had a few more resources, because 7 or 8 resources might not be enough. I'd put at least 2 pages in there. But overall, very strong IA. I was a bit critical on it, but that's what I'm trying to do, trying to help everyone just tear it apart as much as I can so that at least everyone gets a learning from this. Hopefully it wasn't too long, wasn't too complicated, edging on 30 minutes right now, but that's okay. Thank you guys for staying to the end. I know it's a long video. Still, I'm getting tired as well too. Might have to stop talking. Anyway, very nicely done, Matt. Very impressed with your IA. But please, overall, just read the Geo Guide. There's nothing else to it. If you read, you can't go wrong if you just read the Geo Guide step by step. It literally tells you what they want in every single part of your IA. So once again, go through it. Nicely done, and good luck in your IA, guys.